They thought forcing her to kneel in silver chains would break her spirit. They thought a defective Omega, small and scarred and silent, was worth nothing more than the dirt beneath their boots. They were wrong. The Alpha King wasn't searching for perfection. He wasn't hunting for obedience or beauty, or the kind of Omega who would simper and submit without question. He was searching for fire. And Lysandra Ravencrest, kneeling in those burning silver chains, with her chin held high and defiance blazing in her storm gray eyes, was about to set his entire world aflame. The ceremonial hall of the Ravencrest pack was packed wall to wall with witnesses. 300 wolves, maybe more, crammed into the ancient stone building that smelled of incense and old blood and the particular tang of anticipation that came before a spectacle. And this was a spectacle. Lysandra stood at the altar in a white dress that had been chosen for her, not by her. The fabric was too tight across her ribs, too loose at the shoulders, because no one had bothered to ask her measurements. Why would they? She was merchandise being transferred from one owner to another. Merchandise didn't need to be comfortable. The dress had cost more than she'd ever owned in her life, but it felt like a noose. Cassian Thornwell stood beside her, massive and imposing in his formal blacks. He was handsome in the way a blade was handsome, all sharp edges and cold surfaces. His hand gripped her elbow hard enough to bruise, hard enough that she could feel each of his fingers pressing into her bone. A warning, a promise. The priest droned on about unity and duty and the sacred bonds of mating. Words that meant nothing, words that turned her stomach. Lysandra kept her eyes fixed on the stained glass window behind the altar. Blue and gold light filtered through it, painting patterns on the stone floor. She focused on those patterns, counted them. Anything to avoid looking at the man beside her, anything to avoid seeing the satisfaction in her father's face, where he stood in the front row, arms crossed, watching his property finally being put to use. Alpha Aldrich Ravencrest had made his feelings about his only child abundantly clear for 23 years. Disappointment. She was a disappointment. Too small, too weak, too quiet. An Omega when he'd wanted an Alpha heir. A daughter when he'd needed a son. And now, finally, she was useful. Cassian Thornwell was a beta with connections to the Northern Council. Marrying him would secure trade routes and political alliances. It would elevate the Ravencrest pack's standing. It would give Aldrich what he'd always wanted. Power. The fact that Cassian had a reputation for brutality, that his last two Omegas had died under mysterious circumstances, that the servants in his household walked on eggshells and flinched at shadows, none of that mattered. Lysandra was a means to an end. The priest turned to her. His voice echoed through the hall, bouncing off stone walls and high ceilings. Lysandra Ravencrest, do you accept this mating bond? Do you pledge yourself body and soul to Cassian Thornwell, to serve and obey until death claims you? The hall went silent. 300 wolves held their breath. Cassian's grip on her elbow tightened to the point of pain. She felt his nails digging in through the fabric. His other hand moved to the small of her back, fingers splaying possessively. This was it. The moment she was supposed to bow her head and whisper yes and seal herself into a life of submission and suffering. The moment she was supposed to accept that this was all she deserved and all she would ever be. Property. Lysandra lifted her chin. She met the priest's eyes. And she said clearly, loudly, so that every single wolf in that hall could hear her, no. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then everything exploded. Cassian's hand tracked across her face so hard her vision went white. The sound of it echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Lysandra stumbled, would have fallen if he hadn't been gripping her other arm. Blood filled her mouth. She'd bitten her tongue. You little... Cassian snarled, raising his hand again. Enough! Aldrich's voice cut through the chaos. He was on the altar in 3 strides, his face purple with rage. What did you say? Lysandra straightened. Her cheek throbbed. Her tongue bled, but she looked her father in the eye and repeated, No, I will not mate him. You will not. Aldrich grabbed her by the throat, lifting her onto her toes, his claws extended, pricking her skin. You ungrateful, worthless. I will not be his breeding slave. The words came out strangled but clear. I will not spend my life being beaten and broken for the sake of your political ambitions. I would rather die. The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Shocked whispers. Scandalized murmurs. This didn't happen. Omegas didn't refuse. They couldn't refuse. Aldrich's grip tightened. Black spots danced in Lysandra's vision. But she didn't struggle. Didn't beg. She just stared at him with those storm gray eyes and waited. You want to die, he whispered. That can be arranged. He threw her to the ground. Lysandra hit the stone floor hard. Her hands scraped. Her knees cracked against marble. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't cry out. She wouldn't give them that. This Omega, Aldrich announced to the hall, his voice ringing with authority, has defied pack law. She has refused a sanctioned mating. She has brought shame upon the Ravencrest name. He turned to look down at her, and there was nothing in his face. No love, no regret, nothing. As of this moment, Lysandra Ravencrest is dead to me. She is no daughter of mine. She is nothing. The words should have hurt. They didn't. Because Lysandra had always known this truth. She'd never been his daughter. Not really. Just a disappointment he'd been forced to tolerate. Now he didn't have to pretend anymore. Cassian stepped forward, his handsome face twisted with rage. She humiliated me in front of 300 witnesses. I demand satisfaction. I demand punishment. As is your right, Aldrich agreed. He raised his voice. The Northern Council will convene immediately to pass judgment. This Omega's fate will be decided by law. And just like that, it was over. Guards appeared. Rough hands grabbed Lysandra's arms, hauled her to her feet. Someone ripped the white dress, tearing the too tight fabric from shoulder to waist. The sound of it made her flinch more than the violence had. They dragged her from the altar as the crowd parted like water, everyone pulling back to avoid contamination, to avoid being associated with the defiant Omega who just destroyed her own life. The last thing Lysandra saw before they pulled her through the doors was her father's face. Cold, indifferent, done with her. The Northern Council convened in a stone building that had stood for 500 years. It had witnessed countless judgments, countless sentences, countless wolves kneeling before the council elders and begging for mercy. Lysandra didn't kneel yet. They'd put her in a holding cell, first a tiny room with stone walls and a locked door and nothing else. No window, no furniture, nothing but cold and darkness and the sound of her own breathing. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall and her knees pulled to her chest. Her cheeks still throbbed where Cassian had hit her. Her throat ached where her father had choked her. Her hands were scraped raw from hitting the stone floor. But she felt oddly calm. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd refused the mating, and now whatever happened next, at least she'd made the choice. At least she'd had that much control over her own fate. The door opened. Lysandra looked up, expecting guards, expecting to be dragged to the council chamber and her execution. Instead, an old woman entered. Elder Moira was ancient, even by werewolf standards. Her hair was white as snow, her face carved with wrinkles, her eyes a pale, washed-out blue that seemed to see everything. She sat on the Northern Council, had sat there for over a century, and was known for being stern but fair. She closed the door behind her. "Foolish child," Moira said softly. "Do you know what you've done?" "I refuse to be property," Lysandra replied. Her voice was steady. "If that's foolish, then yes, I'm foolish." Moira studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It was a sad smile full of old grief and older regret. "You remind me of my daughter," she said. "She had your fire, your stubborn refusal to bend." The smile faded. She died for it. Forced into a mating with a cruel alpha who beat her until her body gave out. Moira moved closer, lowering herself to sit beside Lysandra on the cold floor. "I couldn't save her. I tried, but pack law is absolute. Once a mating is sanctioned, there's no escape." "I'm sorry," Lysandra whispered, and she meant it. She could hear the genuine pain in the old woman's voice. "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Moira reached into her robes and pulled out a small amulet on a silver chain. It was beautiful, carved from dark stone that seemed to absorb light. "The council will vote for death or exile. You'll be taken before the Alphaking for final judgment. He's not known for mercy, child. He's ancient and powerful and cruel." "I know." Everyone knew about King Theron's Shadowbane, 320 years old and still ruling with an iron fist. They said he'd killed his own brother. They said he took lovers but never mates, using wolves for pleasure and discarding them when he grew bored. They said he had no heart. "Wear this," Moira pressed the amulet into Lysandra's hands. "It's a protection charm. It won't save you from judgment, but it might help in ways you don't expect." Lysandra looked down at the carved stone. It was cool against her palm, smooth and oddly comforting. "Thank you," she said. Moira stood, her old bones creaking. "Don't thank me yet, child. Surviving the Alpha King's judgment is only the beginning of your trials." She left. Lysandra was alone again, holding an amulet that was supposed to protect her, though she didn't understand how. She slipped the chain over her head. The stone settled against her breastbone, hidden beneath her torn dress. And she waited. They came for her an hour later. 6 guards, all males, all betas, built like mountains. They didn't speak to her, didn't look at her. just pulled her out of the cell and marched her through corridors that grew progressively more elaborate the farther they walked. Stone gave way to marble. Bare walls became tapestries. Darkness became torch-lit grandeur. They were taking her to the heart of the Northern Kingdom, to the Alpha King's throne room. The doors at the end of the corridor were massive, 20 feet tall, carved from ancient oak, reinforced with iron. They opened without sound, swinging inward to reveal a space so vast it made Lysandra's breath catch. The throne room was cavernous. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Columns thick as redwoods marched down either side. Stained glass windows let in colored light that painted everything in shades of crimson and gold. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of black marble, sat a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian. The throne was empty. The guards marched her forward. Their boots echoed on the polished floor, each step bouncing off stone and wood and glass. The sound seemed to go on forever. They stopped in the center of the room. One of the guards produced silver chains. Lysandra's breath caught. Silver burned werewolves. It wouldn't kill them, but it hurt. It hurt worse than anything else. Please, she heard herself say, please don't. They didn't care. They wrapped the chains around her wrists, around her ankles, connecting them so she couldn't stand upright. The metal touched her skin, and it was like being branded, like fire, like acid. Lysandra bit down on her tongue to keep from screaming, tasted blood again, felt tears burn in her eyes. They forced her to her knees. The silver burned through her skin. She could smell it. The acrid stench of burning flesh. Her flesh. The council has voted, one of the guards announced to the empty throne room. Death or exile. The Alpha King will decide. Then they left. All 6 of them turned and marched back the way they'd come. The massive doors closed behind them with a boom that echoed forever. And Lysandra was alone, kneeling on cold marble in silver chains that burned and burned and burned. Her white ceremonial dress, already torn, was now stained with blood. Her blood. The silver was cutting into her wrists, her ankles opening, wounds that wept and bled. She tried to shift her weight to ease the pressure, but the chains clinked and pulled tighter. Fresh pain lanced through her, a whimper escaped before she could stop it. No crying, she'd promised herself. No matter what happened, she wouldn't cry, wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Lysandra lifted her chin. She stared at that empty throne, and she waited to die. Time passed strangely in the throne room. Without windows showing the sun's position, without any sound except her own ragged breathing, it could have been minutes or hours. The pain became everything. The burning silver was all she knew, all she could feel, until she almost forgot there had been a time before pain. Her vision started to blur. Blood loss, probably. The chains had cut deep. She was so focused on staying conscious, on keeping her chin up, and her eyes open that she didn't hear the door open. But she felt him enter. The air in the throne room changed. Became charged electric, like the moment before lightning struck. Power rolled through the space, thick and suffocating and absolute. Lysandra's head snapped up. A man stood in the doorway. No, not a man, a king. Theron Shadowbane was massive. 6.5 feet of raw muscle and predatory grace. He wore black head to toe, expensive fabrics that probably cost more than the Ravencrest estate. His hair was dark, almost black, falling just past his collar. His face was all sharp angles and harder edges. Handsome in the way a blade was handsome, beautiful in the way violence could be beautiful. But it was his eyes that stole Lysandra's breath. Silver, molten silver that seemed to glow from within. Wolf eyes in a human face. Eyes that marked him as something more than just alpha. Something ancient. Something other. Those silver eyes locked onto her, and the world stopped. Lysandra felt it like a physical blow, like being struck by lightning. A shock that started in her chest and radiated outward, setting every nerve ending on fire. The amulet around her neck burned suddenly, searingly hot, but it was nothing compared to the sensation ripping through her body. Recognition. Her wolf, who'd been quiet and subdued her entire life, suddenly roared to awareness, throwing itself against the cage of her consciousness, howling one word over and over. Mate, mate, mate. No, that wasn't possible. Mate bonds were rare. Finding your true mate was like winning a cosmic lottery. The odds were astronomical, and they certainly didn't snap into place when you were kneeling in silver chains waiting to be executed. But the bond didn't care about odds or circumstances or the fact that this was the worst possible timing in the history of terrible timing. It existed. It was real. And judging by the way Theron Shadowbane had frozen in the doorway, his eyes going wide, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air, he felt it too. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The Alpha King stared at the kneeling Omega in silver chains. The Omega stared back at the king who was supposed to execute her, and the mate bond hummed between them, undeniable and unbreakable, and absolutely impossible to ignore. Theron moved first. He crossed the throne room in long strides, his boots echoing on marble each step, bringing him closer until he was standing directly in front of her, towering over her, close enough that she could see the scars on his hands, the way his jaw clenched, the muscle ticking in his throat. He crouched down, brought himself to eye level. And Lysandra, even through the pain of the silver burning her skin, even through the shock of the mate bond snapping into place, couldn't look away from those molten silver eyes. "You're the Omega who refused her mating," Theron said. His voice was deep, rough, like gravel sliding over silk. It sent shivers down her spine despite everything. "Yes, your Majesty," Lysandra managed. Her voice came out stronger than she'd expected, steadier. "Do you know the penalty for such defiance? Death or exile, your Majesty? And yet you refused anyway." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. Why, the question surprised her. She'd expected judgment, not curiosity, condemnation, not inquiry. "Because Lord Cassian is a monster who would have brutalized me," she said. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Because I would rather die with my dignity intact than live as his property. Because some things are worth defying tradition for." One of the guards made a strangled sound. Speaking to the Alpha King with such directness, especially while chained and awaiting punishment, was unheard of. But Lysandra was so tired of pretending, of bowing, of making herself small to appease wolves who saw her as nothing more than a tool. If she was going to die, she would at least die honestly. Theron's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The temperature in the throne room seemed to drop several degrees. Lysandra felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up as the king's power pressed down on everyone present. "You think your comfort matters more than pack law?" he asked. His tone was dangerously soft. "I think pack law that forces Omegas into abusive matings is wrong," Lysandra replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I think a system that values political alliances over the welfare of its people is broken. And I think if speaking that truth means I die here today, then at least I'll die knowing I didn't spend my life being afraid." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the guards seemed to have stopped breathing. Lysandra waited for the Alpha King's fury, for him to order her execution on the spot. She had just called his laws broken and unjust to his face. There was no coming back from that. But Theron Shadowbane didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. He moved closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and winter snow scent that clung to him. This close, his size was even more overwhelming. She had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lysandra Ravencrest, your Majesty." "Lysandra," he said it slowly as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "Do you know why I asked to see you personally, Lysandra Ravencrest?" She shook her head slightly, not trusting her voice. This close to him, she could feel the mate bond pulling at her, urging her closer, demanding she acknowledge it. "Because in 320 years of ruling these kingdoms," Theron said, "I have never had an Omega look me in the eye and tell me my laws are broken." His lips curved into something that might have been a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Most wolves grovel. They beg. They offer me whatever I want in exchange for mercy. But you—" He reached out, lifted her chin with one finger, forcing her to hold his gaze. His touch was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. "You kneel here in silver chains and lecture me about justice." "I'm sorry, your Majesty," Lysandra whispered. "I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize." The command in his voice was absolute. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which yet." "Probably both, your Majesty." This time the smile reached his eyes. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less like an ancient king, and more like a man who found genuine amusement in her audacity. "Probably both," he agreed. He studied her for another long moment. Lysandra could feel him weighing her, measuring her, making a decision she couldn't begin to guess at. Then his expression shifted, became more formal, more regal. "I'm going to offer you a choice, Lysandra Ravencrest," Theron said. "The first real choice anyone has probably offered you in your entire life." He straightened his hand, falling away from her face, and she immediately missed the warmth of his touch. Which was insane, which was the mate bond talking, which she needed to ignore because this was the Alpha King, and he was about to decide whether she lived or died. "Choice one," Theron said, his tone formal now, as if he were pronouncing judgment. "I can grant you exile. You'll be stripped of your pack affiliation, given enough gold to start a new life somewhere far from here, and sent on your way. You'll be free, Lysandra, free to go wherever you want to be, whoever you want, with no one to command you or force you into unwanted bonds. It was more than she dared to hope for. Exile meant survival. It meant freedom. It meant a chance to build a life on her own terms, away from her father and Cassian, and every wolf who'd ever looked at her and seen only a disappointment. And choice two, she asked, because she could see in his eyes that he wasn't finished. Choice two, Theron said, and something dangerous glinted in those molten silver eyes, is that you stay here, with me, as mine. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Lysandra's mouth go dry. I don't understand, Your Majesty. Don't you? He crouched down again, bringing his face close to hers, close enough that she could see the silver flecks swirling in his irises, could count the faint scars on his jaw. I'm offering you a place in my household, Lysandra, not as a servant, not as a political alliance, as my personal companion, my mate. You would belong to me in every way that matters. Your body, your time, your loyalty, everything. Heat flooded through her at the frank hunger in his voice, at the way his eyes traveled over her face and down to where her torn dress had slipped off one shoulder. This was wrong. He was the Alpha King. She was a disgraced Omega awaiting punishment. The power imbalance was staggering. And yet, why? The word came out breathless. Why would you want me? Because you're not afraid of me, Theron said simply. Because you speak the truth even when it could get you killed. Because in 3 centuries I have never met an Omega who looked at me like I was a man instead of a monster. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. And because the moment you walked into this throne room, my wolf recognized something in you that I've spent lifetimes searching for. The mate bond. He was talking about the mate bond. Lysandra felt it too, had felt it the moment their eyes met across the throne room. That pull, that recognition, that sense of rightness that defied all logic and reason. You can feel it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she whispered. The goddess has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't she? You refuse one mating only to discover that your true mate is the very king who's supposed to pass judgment on you. He was right. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was real. I'm still in chains, Lysandra pointed out. Her voice shook. You said you'd own me completely, that I'd have to submit when you commanded it. I did say that. Theron didn't move away, didn't soften his words. Because I need you to understand what you'd be choosing if you stay. I am not a gentle wolf, Lysandra. I am ancient and powerful, and I have spent centuries doing whatever I pleased. If you become mine, I will own you completely. Your pleasure will be mine to give or withhold. Your body will be mine to command. You will kneel when I tell you to kneel. Submit when I tell you to submit. Obey every order I give you. His words should have terrified her, should have sent her scrambling for the first option for exile and freedom. Instead, they sent liquid heat pooling low in her belly, made her acutely aware of how close he was, how his scent was filling her lungs with every breath, how the mate bond was singing in her chest. And if I refuse, she managed, then I grant you exile with my blessing, and you never see me again. His expression softened slightly. I won't force this, Lysandra. The mate bond is a gift, not a prison. If you don't want it, if you don't want me, then I'll let you go. But if I stay, her voice was barely audible. If I stay, I'm yours. Completely. His thumb traced her lower lip, and Lysandra felt her breath catch. There's no halfway, no negotiation. You either give me everything, or you walk away now while you still can. It was insane. She had just refused one mating because she didn't want to be owned. And now she was considering agreeing to become the property of the most powerful alpha in existence. Except it wasn't the same thing at all. Cassian had wanted to own her because she was useful, a means to an end, a tool to secure alliances and produce heirs. Theron wanted her because of the mate bond, because of something neither of them had chosen but both of them felt. There was a vast difference between being claimed because you were valuable property and being claimed because you were valued. You said I'd own you too, Lysandra said slowly, working through the implications. The mate bond goes both ways. Something fierce and possessive flashed across Theron's face. Yes, I would be yours as completely as you would be mine. My protection, my loyalty, my devotion, everything I am would belong to you. That's how the mate bond works, Lysandra. It's not ownership in the way Cassian wanted to own you. It's recognition. You would be the most important thing in my world. The one wolf I could never lie to, never betray, never harm. The only wolf who could command me with a word and know I would obey. That doesn't sound like you'd own me at all, Lysandra said. It sounds like we'd own each other. We would. His smile was slow and devastating. But I enjoy the illusion of control, and my wolf enjoys your submission. So if you stay, you'll kneel for me. You'll call me your majesty or sir. You'll obey when I give you commands, at least in public. He leaned in closer, his lips almost brushing her ear. In private, you can argue with me all you want. Challenge me, question my decisions. I'll value your counsel precisely because you're brave enough to tell me when I'm wrong. It was everything Cassian's offer had never been. Freedom wrapped in the trappings of submission. Power disguised as surrender. A partnership where they both got what they needed. I have one condition, Lysandra heard herself say. Theron pulled back, eyebrows raised. You're negotiating while kneeling in silver chains awaiting execution. You offered me a choice. I'm choosing, but I have a condition. The smile that spread across his face was pure male satisfaction. Name it. The Omega laws, Lysandra said. You said they're broken. Help me fix them. Let me establish protections so that no Omega has to choose between an abusive mating and exile. Let me be more than just your mate. Let me make a difference. For a moment, Theron just stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed. The sound was rich and genuine, echoing through the throne room. It transformed him, made him look less like an ancient king and more like a man who'd just been surprised in the best possible way. You refuse one mating to preserve your dignity, he said, still grinning. Get hauled before the Alpha King for judgment. Feel the mate bond snap into place, and your first instinct is to negotiate for political reform. He shook his head, wonder in his eyes. You're magnificent. Is that a yes? Lysandra pressed. It's a yes. Theron's expression turned serious. You and me, Lysandra, partners, equals, will rebuild these kingdoms into something better than what they are now. You said my laws were broken. Help me fix them. Rule beside me. Share my throne. I don't know how to be a queen, your majesty. You'll learn. I'll teach you. He reached out, and this time he cupped her face with both hands, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. But first I need you to make your choice. Exile and freedom, or me and everything that comes with it. Choose now, Lysandra, because I don't have the patience to wait much longer. She should choose exile. She should take the safe option, the sensible option, the choice that wouldn't tie her to a king who just admitted he was ancient and possessive and demanding. I choose you, Lysandra said. The words were barely out of her mouth before the silver chains fell away. They hit the marble floor with a clatter, the metal smoking where it had burned her skin. Lysandra gasped as the pain suddenly stopped, as fresh air hit the wounds on her wrists and ankles. Theron's power washed over her, warm and soothing, and she watched in amazement as her skin knitted back together. The burns healed, the cuts closed. Within seconds, there was no evidence the chains had ever touched her. Mine, Theron growled. He pulled her to her feet and kissed her. The kiss was fierce, claiming. It left no doubt about his intentions. This was a man who'd spent centuries taking what he wanted, and right now he wanted her. Lysandra kissed him back just as fiercely. Her fingers tangled in his dark hair, pulling him closer. She could feel the mate bond humming between them, growing stronger with every second, every touch, every shared breath. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His eyes had gone completely silver, his wolf rising to the surface. Guards, he said without looking away from her face. Leave us. No one enters this throne room for the next hour. Lysandra had forgotten there were guards in the room. She heard them file out quickly, their boots echoing on marble. The massive doors boomed shut, and then they were alone. The Alpha King and his newly claimed mate standing in the center of an empty throne room with nothing but air and anticipation between them. Come here, Theron commanded. His voice was rough with barely restrained need. Lysandra took a step toward him. Then another, until she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body again. Kneel. She could have refused, could have tested whether he meant what he said about her being able to challenge him. But the truth was she wanted to kneel. Not because she was forced to, not because she had no other choice, because she chose to, because there was power in submission when it was freely given. Lysandra sank gracefully to her knees, keeping her eyes on his face. The marble was cold beneath her, but she barely felt it. All her attention was focused on the man standing before her, on the hunger that blazed in his silver eyes. Perfect, he breathed. His hand came to rest on top of her head, a gentle weight that somehow felt like both a blessing and a brand. You're so beautiful like this. Do you know how long I've waited for you? How many centuries I've ruled alone, wondering if the goddess would ever see fit to give me a mate? I'm here now, Lysandra said softly. You are. Theron's hand slid from her head to cup her face, tilting it up. And I'm never letting you go. You understand that, don't you? You're mine now, Lysandra. Forever. There's no going back from this. I don't want to go back. Something in his expression cracked, revealed a vulnerability she suspected he rarely showed. I'm going to mark you, he said. Claim you in front of the entire kingdom. Make sure every wolf in these territories knows exactly who you belong to. Are you ready for that? No, yes, maybe. She didn't know, but she nodded anyway because whatever came next, she wanted to face it with him. Theron pulled her to her feet, then swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Lysandra made a startled sound, her arms automatically going around his neck for balance. I can walk, Your Majesty. I know, but I've waited 320 years for this moment. Let me enjoy it. He carried her through the throne room toward a door she hadn't noticed before, hidden in the shadows behind the obsidian throne. It opened onto a private staircase that spiraled upward into the castle's highest tower. Where are we going? Lysandra asked, though part of her already knew the answer. My chambers, the royal suite, your new home. He glanced down at her as he climbed the stairs effortlessly, not even breathing hard despite her weight. I'm going to take my time with you, Lysandra. I'm going to learn every inch of your body, every sound you make, every expression that crosses your face. And by the time I'm finished, you're going to know exactly what it means to belong to me. The promise in his words sent heat flooding through her. This was really happening. She was really about to give herself to this ancient, powerful king, the most feared wolf in all the northern territories. And instead of being terrified, she was excited. They reached the top of the staircase. Theron shouldered open a door into the most beautiful room Lysandra had ever seen. The royal suite was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire kingdom. A massive four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in black silk that shimmered in the afternoon light. Thick rugs covered the stone floor. A fireplace big enough to stand in crackled with warmth. He set her down gently in the center of the room, his hands lingering on her waist. Last chance, he said softly. If you want to change your mind, now's the time. Once I claim you, that's it. The bond will be complete. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours for the rest of our lives. Lysandra looked up at him. At this king who'd given her a choice when no one else had, who'd offered her partnership instead of property, who looked at her like she was precious instead of problematic. I'm not changing my mind, she said firmly. I choose you, Theron. I choose this. I choose us. The use of his name instead of his title seemed to break something in him. He made a low sound in his throat and pulled her close, kissing her with a desperate hunger that stole her breath away. And Lysandra, who had refused one mating to preserve her dignity, went willingly into the arms of the man the goddess had chosen for her. Because this wasn't about obligation or duty or political alliance. This was about choice, about partnership, about two souls recognizing each other across centuries and saying, yes, this is right, this is real, this is everything. The afternoon sun painted golden light across the obsidian throne below. The kingdom spread out beneath the tower, unaware that their king had just found his queen. And in the royal chambers high above, a defiant Omega, who'd knelt in silver chains, was about to be crowned. Not with metal, with teeth and claiming and a bond that would last for eternity. 3 weeks had passed since the council formally recognized Lysandra as Luna Queen. 3 weeks of whirlwind transformation. The council meeting itself had been explosive but brief. Theron's declaration that Lysandra was his true mate had left little room for argument. Pack law was absolute on this matter. A mate bond superseded all contracts, all arrangements, all political maneuvering. Cassian and Aldrich had protested, threatened, demanded. And Theron had shut them down with the kind of cold authority that came from 3 centuries of absolute rule. The Omega laws had been reformed. Matings now required royal approval. Omegas had the right to refuse abusive arrangements. And Lysandra had been officially named Omega Advocate with direct access to the king and authority to investigate grievances. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a war. Lysandra sat in her new office, a bright room adjacent to the throne room, reviewing the flood of petitions that had arrived in the past weeks. Omegas from across the kingdom had heard about the new laws, about the Luna Queen who'd refused her own mating and lived to tell the tale. They were coming to her for help, hundreds of them. The first public audience as Omega Advocate was scheduled for today. Lysandra wore her formal blues, the sapphire dress that displayed Theron's mark prominently. She'd learned quickly that the mark wasn't just a symbol of their bond. It was armor, protection, a reminder that she spoke with the king's authority. The great hall was packed when she entered. Omegas filled every available space, their faces a mixture of hope and fear and desperate determination. Some had traveled for weeks to be here, to finally have someone listen. Lysandra took her seat beside Theron's throne, felt his hand squeeze hers briefly under the table. A reassurance. You're not alone in this. The first few cases were straightforward. A mating that needed approval, a dispute over territory, a request for sanctuary. Then a young Omega named Mira stepped forward. She was barely 20, stick-thin, with bruises on her arms that she tried to hide under long sleeves. Her scent was sour with fear. Your Majesty, she said, her voice trembling. I seek refuge. My Alpha, he hurts me. I can't go back. Please. Lysandra's heart clenched. Tell me everything, she said gently. The story that spilled out was horrifying. Mira had been forced into a mating at 18. Her Alpha was brutal, violent, using her as a punching bag whenever his temper flared. She'd tried to leave once before, but pack law said she belonged to him. She'd been dragged back and beaten so badly she couldn't walk for a week. I'll die if I go back, Mira whispered. Please, please help me. Lysandra looked at Theron. He nodded. The decision was hers. As of this moment, Lysandra announced, her voice ringing through the hall, your mating is annulled. You are under royal protection. Your Alpha will be summoned to answer for his crimes, and if found guilty, he will be stripped of his rank and exiled from this kingdom. Gasps echoed through the hall. This was unprecedented. Omegas didn't leave their Alphas. Matings weren't annulled, but Lysandra had just changed that. Mira collapsed to her knees, sobbing with relief. Thank you. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you. Guards came forward to escort Mira to safety to the sanctuary Lysandra had established in the palace grounds. And Lysandra felt something shift in the room. Hope. For the first time in generations, Omegas had hope. But in the back of the hall, watching with a cold calculation, stood a woman Lysandra hadn't noticed before. Beautiful, elegant, draped in silks and jewels that screamed wealth and status. Vivian Ashcroft, beta aristocrat, daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the kingdom. And Lysandra would learn soon enough that a wolf who'd been trying to catch Theron's attention for 50 years. Their eyes met across the crowded hall. Vivian's gaze was pure venom, and Lysandra felt the first cold finger of real danger slide down her spine. The confrontation came 3 days later. Lysandra was in the royal gardens, taking a rare moment of peace among the roses when Vivian appeared. She moved like water, graceful and deliberate, her emerald gown flowing behind her. Up close, she was even more stunning. Flawless skin, perfect features, the kind of beauty that turned heads and stopped conversations. So you're the famous Omega who captured the king's heart, Vivian said. Her voice was silk over steel. I must say I'm surprised. I didn't think Theron had a taste for broken things. Lysandra straightened. Is there something I can help you with, Lady Ashcroft? Oh, I'm just curious. Vivian circled her like a predator. What exactly did you do to make him claim you? What tricks did you use? Because let's be honest, darling, you're nothing special. Small, plain, scarred. You were disowned by your own father, rejected by your betrothed, kneeling in chains waiting to die. Each word was a precision strike designed to hit where it hurt most. And yet somehow, Vivian continued, you managed to seduce the most powerful Alpha in existence. I'm genuinely impressed. You must be quite talented on your knees. The insult was deliberate, public, designed to provoke. Lysandra could feel her temper rising, could feel her wolf snarling inside her chest, demanding she respond, demanding she defend herself. But she was a queen now. Queens didn't rise to petty provocations. The king recognized his true mate, Lysandra said calmly. If you have questions about his choices, perhaps you should take them up with him. Oh, I intend to. Vivian's smile was all teeth. After all, true mate bonds can be so fragile, so easily broken when the wrong kind of pressure is applied. It was a threat, clear as day. Before Lysandra could respond, a hand settled on her shoulder. Warm, solid, protective. Theron had appeared without sound, his silver eyes locked on Vivian with an intensity that would have made lesser wolves run. Is there a problem here? He asked. His voice was dangerously soft. Vivian's expression shifted instantly. The venom disappeared, replaced by demure sweetness. Your Majesty, I was just introducing myself to your new queen, offering my congratulations. How thoughtful. Theron's tone made it clear he didn't believe a word. Lady Ashcroft, allow me to be perfectly clear. Lysandra is my mate, my queen. She is under my protection. And anyone who disrespects her, anyone who threatens her, anyone who so much as looks at her wrong will answer to me personally. Are we understood? Vivian's mask slipped for just a moment. Lysandra saw the rage beneath the jealousy, the hatred. Then it was gone, hidden behind that perfect smile. Of course, Your Majesty. Crystal clear. She curtsied and glided away, but not before shooting Lysandra one last look that promised this wasn't over. When she was gone, Theron turned to Lysandra. Are you all right? I'm fine. Lysandra leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. She's just jealous. She's dangerous. Theron's arms came around her, holding her close. Vivian Ashcroft has been trying to become my queen for 50 years. She won't give up easily. I can handle her. I know you can. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But you don't have to handle her alone. We're in this together, remember, together. The word had never sounded so good. That night, Lysandra was working late in her office when Theron burst through the door. His face was ashen. What's wrong? Lysandra was on her feet immediately. There's been an assassination attempt. His voice was tight. At the state dinner I was supposed to attend tonight, the wine was poisoned. My taster, he's dead, Lysandra. He's dead because he drank something meant for me. Ice flooded through her veins. Someone had tried to kill Theron. Who, she demanded. Who would dare? I don't know yet, but the poison was identified. Wolfsbane extract refined to be undetectable by scent. It's rare, difficult to obtain. And according to my investigators, it was last seen in Ravencrest territory. Lysandra's blood went cold and Fenanton. My father. We don't know that yet, Theron said, but his expression was grim. But the evidence points that direction. I'm sending investigators to question him tomorrow. Lysandra sank into her chair, her mind racing. Her father had always been cold, always been distant, but murder-assassination of the Alpha King, it seemed impossible. And yet, I want to go with them, she said. If my father is involved, I want to look him in the eye when we find out. Lysandra, please, she met his gaze steadily. I need to know. I need to face him. Theron studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but you stay close to me. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately. I will. The investigation led them to unexpected places. Not to her father's estate, as they'd expected, but to the outskirts of the kingdom. To abandoned warehouses and hidden facilities that shouldn't exist. What they found made Lysandra's blood run cold. Omegas. Dozens of them. Locked in cages, chained, starved, some barely alive. A trafficking ring, operating right under the kingdom's nose. Dear gods! Theron breathed, his face a mask of fury. How long has this been going on? One of his investigators, a grizzled beta named Marcus, shook his head. Years, Your Majesty, maybe decades. They've been moving Omegas across borders, selling them to rival kingdoms. The operation is sophisticated, well-funded. Who's running it? Lysandra demanded. We're still investigating, but the trail leads back to Lord Cassian Thornwell. Cassian, of course. The man who'd wanted to claim her, who'd been humiliated when she refused. The man who'd demanded her execution. He was trafficking Omegas. There's more, Marcus said grimly. Lady Vivian Ashcroft is also implicated. She's been supplying Omegas from aristocratic families, wolves who disappeared and were assumed to have run away. Lysandra felt sick. This was bigger than she'd imagined. This was a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of society. And my father, she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Not involved in the trafficking, Your Majesty. In fact, Marcus pulled out a folder. We found these in one of the warehouses. Letters from Alpha Ravencrest. To you. Unsent. Lysandra took the folder with trembling hands, opened it, page after page of her father's handwriting. Letters he'd written but never sent. Investigations he'd conducted. Evidence he'd gathered against Cassian. And in the margins in small tight script, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have protected you. He's been investigating Thornwell for months, Marcus said quietly. The poison that killed the taster. It was meant to frame him to discredit his investigation and silence him permanently. Theron's hand found hers, squeezed gently. Your father's been trying to bring down Cassian's operation, he said, and someone wanted to stop him. Lysandra didn't know what to feel. Relief that her father wasn't a would-be assassin. Anger that he'd never reached out to her directly. Never apologized to her face. Sadness that even now, even when he was trying to do the right thing, he couldn't bring himself to bridge the gap between them. We need to move fast, Theron said. If Cassian knows we're onto him, he'll destroy evidence. Disappear. We need to coordinate a raid, rescue these Omegas, and arrest everyone involved. I want to help, Lysandra said. Absolutely not. Theron's response was immediate. This is too dangerous. These are my people, Theron. Omegas who were failed by the very system we're trying to fix. I need to be there when they're freed. I need them to see that their queen didn't abandon them. They stared at each other. Finally, Theron closed his eyes. You're going to give me gray hair before I'm 400, you know that. Probably, Theron. Fine, but you stay with me at all times. You don't take unnecessary risks. And if I tell you to run, you run. Deal. Deal. But as they prepared for the raid, as Lysandra put on protective gear and steeled herself for what was coming, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This felt too easy, too convenient, like they were walking into a trap. The raid happened at dawn. Theron's forces surrounded the warehouse complex, cutting off all escape routes. The plan was simple, fast. Overwhelm them before they could destroy evidence or harm the captive Omegas. It should have worked. It would have worked if Vivian hadn't been 3 steps ahead. The warehouses were empty, not just of Omegas, of everything. Evidence, documents, people, all gone. It's a trap, Theron snarled. Fall back. Everyone fall. The explosion cut off his words. Fire erupted from 3 sides, massive fireballs that turned dawn into midday, that sent his soldiers scattering. Screams echoed. The smell of burning fur and flesh filled the air. Theron grabbed Lysandra, shielding her with his body as debris rained down. Run! He roared. Get to the vehicles! But before they could move, before they could retreat, figures emerged from the smoke. 20 of them, maybe more. All armed, all moving with military precision. Mercenaries. And at their head, beautiful and terrible and smiling like this was exactly what she'd wanted, stood Vivian Ashcroft. Hello, Your Majesty, she purred. I was hoping you'd bring her. Theron pushed Lysandra behind him, his body a wall between her and danger. This is treason, Vivian. You'll hang for this. Only if you survive to see it. Vivian's smile widened. And I'm afraid that's not in my plans. She gestured. The mercenaries moved. Too fast, too coordinated. Theron fought like the warrior king. He was taking down 3 in the first few seconds. But there were too many. They swarmed him, silver chains appearing, wrapping around his arms, his legs pulling him down. No, Lysandra screamed. She tried to reach him, tried to help, but rough hands grabbed her from behind. Pain exploded across the back of her head. The world tilted. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Theron's face contorted with rage and fear, his silver eyes locked on hers as they dragged her away. And then nothing. Lysandra woke in darkness. Her head throbbed. Her wrists and ankles burned with the familiar agony of silver chains. She was in a cell. Stone walls. No windows. No light except what filtered under the door. She tried to shift to break the chains, but pain lanced through her, and she gasped. I wouldn't try that if I were you. Vivian's voice came from the shadows. A torch flared to life, revealing the beautiful Beta standing just outside the cell, bars immaculate as always, despite the battle. Where is Theron? Lysandra demanded. Her voice came out hoarse. What did you do to him? Alive for now, badly injured, but alive. I needed him conscious to watch what comes next. Ice flooded through Lysandra's veins. What comes next? Vivian crouched down, her eyes gleaming with malice. I'm going to give you a choice, little Omega. Denounce the mate bond publicly. Tell the kingdom you were wrong, that you seduced the king with your Omega tricks, that you beg forgiveness and release him from his obligation. Do that, and I'll let him live. Never. No, Vivian tilted her head. Not even to save his life. How selfish of you. He wouldn't want me to. I don't care what he wants. Vivian's mask cracked, revealing the rage beneath. I have spent 50 years positioning myself to be his queen. 50 years, and then you, some broken little Omega nobody wanted, you stumble into his throne room and take everything that should have been mine. She slammed her hand against the bars. So yes, you will denounce the bond, or you'll watch him die slowly, painfully, and know it was your fault. Lysandra met her gaze steadily. You can torture me. You can threaten him. You can do whatever you want, but I will never betray my mate, never. Vivian's smile was terrible. We'll see about that. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. That pretty mark on your neck, that bond you're so proud of. She gestured to the silver chains. These aren't ordinary restraints. They're specifically designed to suppress bloodlines, to break seals, and unless I'm very much mistaken, She reached through the bars, grabbed Lysandra's torn dress, and ripped it down the back. Lysandra felt cool air hit her spine. Vivian gasped. I knew it, she breathed. The lunar sovereign mark. You're the lost heir. Dear gods, do you even know what you are? What power you're carrying? Lysandra had no idea what she was talking about. Your bloodline, Vivian continued, her voice, almost reverent now, was sealed when you were a child, hidden, protected. But these chains are breaking that seal. And when it shatters completely, when your power awakens, her smile turned predatory. I'm going to take it all, every drop of power in your ancient blood, and I'm going to use it to become the most powerful wolf this kingdom has ever seen. She left, locking the cell door behind her. And Lysandra was alone in the dark silver chains, burning some kind of seal on her back, breaking, and no idea what any of it meant, except that she was in more danger than she'd realized. And Theron, her mate, her king, was somewhere in this place, injured and helpless, waiting for her to save him, or waiting to watch her die. The silver burned. Hour after hour, the chains seared into Lysandra's skin, cutting deeper than metal, reaching for something beneath her flesh. Something old, something sleeping. She could feel it stirring. Whatever seal Vivian had mentioned, whatever ancient power supposedly lived in her blood, it was waking up, and the process felt like being torn apart from the inside. Lysandra bit down on her tongue to keep from screaming. She wouldn't give Vivian the satisfaction, wouldn't let her captors hear her break, but gods, it hurt. The mark on her spine, the lunar sovereign symbol she'd never known existed, burned hotter than the silver. She could feel it pulsing, glowing, trying to break free of whatever prison had held it for 23 years. Through the mate bond, she could feel Theron. He was alive, conscious, and absolutely feral with rage. She sent him everything she had, all her love, all her strength, all her stubborn refusal to give up. Felt him receive it, felt his emotions crash back like a tidal wave. Terror, fury, determination. He was coming for her. She just had to survive long enough for him to arrive. Theron Shadowbane had lived for 320 years. He'd fought in wars that lasted decades, survived betrayals that would have destroyed lesser wolves, built a kingdom from blood and stone and sheer force of will. But he had never in all those centuries felt fear like this. His mate was in danger. His queen was suffering. And he was going to burn down the entire world to get her back. The silver chains had done damage. His soldiers had taken casualties in the explosion. But Theron had rallied them, organized them, turned grief and shock into cold, calculated fury. They would find Vivian's stronghold. They would rescue every captive Omega, and they would make everyone involved pay. Marcus, his lead investigator, appeared at his side. Your Majesty, we've located the facility. Old fortress 20 miles north. Heavy fortifications. At least 50 mercenaries. And he hesitated. Spit it out. Elder Moira is there. She arrived an hour ago with additional forces. Theron's blood went cold. Moira, the council elder who'd seemed so sympathetic to Lysandra's cause, the one who'd given her that amulet, the tracking device. She's been working with Vivian all along, Theron said. It wasn't a question. It appears so, Your Majesty. Betrayal layered on betrayal. A conspiracy that ran deeper than he'd imagined. But it didn't matter. He was still coming. Mobilize everyone, Theron commanded. Full assault. I want that fortress surrounded, and I want it done quietly. No warnings, no mercy. Yes, Your Majesty. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, aging, with gray in his hair and guilt carved into every line of his face. Aldrich Ravencrest. I'm coming with you, the old Alpha said. You have no place in this. She's my daughter. Aldrich's voice broke on the words. I failed her. I disowned her. I let her think I didn't care. But she's my blood, and I won't let her die thinking I never loved her. Theron studied him for a long moment, saw genuine remorse, genuine desperation. Fine, but you follow my orders. And if you do anything at all that puts her in more danger, I'll kill you myself. Understood. They moved out, an army of wolves descending on the fortress like the wrath of the gods themselves. Lysandra had lost track of time. The cell was dark, the pain was constant, and the seal on her spine kept cracking piece by piece, flooding her system with power she didn't know how to control. Her vision kept blurring, going strange, colors too bright, sounds too sharp. She could hear heartbeats through the stone walls, could smell emotions, fear, excitement, anticipation. Something was happening. The door to her cell opened. Vivian entered, followed by Elder Moira. The old woman looked different now, harder. The kindly grandmother facade had disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. "It's time," Moira said. She pulled out a ceremonial knife, the blade etched with symbols Lysandra didn't recognize. "The seal is almost broken. Your power is awakening, and we're going to harvest every drop of it." "Why?" Lysandra's voice came out as a croak. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 50 years ago, the system you're trying to fix killed my daughter." Moira's expression didn't change. "She was forced into a mating with a brutal alpha. He beat her to death over the course of 3 years, and there was nothing I could do. Pack law said she belonged to him." "So you became what you hated," Lysandra whispered. "You traffic Omegas. You torture them. You're no better than the alphas who hurt your daughter." "I'm not trying to be better." Moira crouched down, brought the knife close to Lysandra's throat. "I'm trying to destroy the entire system. And your bloodline, little queen, is going to give me the power to do exactly that." "The lunar sovereigns," Vivian added, practically vibrating with excitement, "were the original ruling family. Before the Shadowbanes took power, they had abilities no modern wolf possesses. Strength, speed, magic. With that power in my veins, I won't just be queen. I'll be a goddess." "You'll be dead," Lysandra said flatly. "Theron will kill you both." "Theron is injured and outnumbered," Vivian smiled. "And even if he makes it here, he'll be too late. The ritual takes 30 minutes. After that, you'll be an empty shell, and I'll be unstoppable." She nodded to Moira. The old woman raised the knife, and the fortress exploded. Not literally, not fire and debris this time, but the sounds of battle. Howls, screams, the clash of metal, and the meaty thud of bodies hitting stone. Theron had arrived. Vivian's face went white. "That's impossible. He couldn't have—" "You underestimated him," Lysandra said. Despite everything, despite the pain and fear, she smiled. "Big mistake," Vivian snarled. "Change of plans. We do this now. Moira, start the ritual." "It's not ready." "I don't care, do it." Moira began chanting in a language that hurt to hear. Words that felt wrong, that scraped against reality itself. She dragged the knife across Lysandra's arm, drawing blood. The seal on Lysandra's spine shattered. Power exploded through her. It felt like lightning in her veins, like fire in her bones, like every cell in her body was being rewritten at the molecular level. Her vision went white, then violet, then silver. She could see everything. The individual stones in the wall, the dust motes floating in the air, the strands of magic Moira was weaving, trying to siphon her power. No. Her wolf surged forward. Not the small, quiet presence that had lived inside her all her life. This was something ancient, powerful, divine. The silver chains which had held her for hours shattered like glass. Lysandra stood, and for the first time in her life, she shifted. The transformation was unlike anything she'd experienced. Her bones didn't just break and reform. They sang. Her muscles didn't just grow. They ignited. Where she'd been kneeling, a massive white wolf now stood, bigger than any alpha, bigger than Theron himself. Her fur glowed with an ethereal light, and her eyes, when she turned them on, Vivian and Moira blazed with pure silver fire. The lunar sovereign had awakened. Vivian stumbled backward. That's impossible." Lysandra lunged. The cell bars might as well have been paper. She tore through them, jaws snapping, claws raking. Moira barely managed to throw up a shield of dark magic, but it cracked under the assault. "Fall back," Vivian screamed. "Regroup. Get reinforcements." They ran. Lysandra pursued, her massive paws eating up ground, her enhanced senses tracking them through the fortress corridors. She could hear the battle above, could smell Theron's scent cedar and winter snow getting closer, could feel him through the bond, his shock and awe and fierce pride as he realized what had happened. His mate had awakened, and she was magnificent. Theron fought his way through the fortress like a force of nature. Mercenaries fell before him. Some surrendered. Most died. He didn't care which. All that mattered was reaching Lysandra, getting to his mate, making sure she was alive. Then he felt it through the bond. Power. Raw, ancient, overwhelming power that made his wolf whimper with recognition and awe. She'd awakened. "Your Majesty," Marcus called out. "Something's coming." A white wolf the size of a small horse burst through the doorway. Glowing, ethereal, beautiful and terrible, and absolutely his, Lysandra. She shifted back to human form, standing naked and glorious in the corridor, her eyes still, silver power crackling around her like visible lightning. "Vivian and Moira are heading for the ritual chamber," she said. Her voice echoed, layered with something other. "They're going to try the ceremony anyway. They have other Omegas captive. They'll use them if they can't use me. Theron pulled off his coat, wrapped it around her shoulders. Can you fight? I'm just getting started. Aldrich appeared behind them, staring at his daughter with wonder and regret. Lysandra, he breathed. I never knew. Your mother, she must have sealed your power to protect you. I thought you were weak, but you were never weak. You were sleeping. We'll have time for family reunions later, Lysandra said. Right now we have enemies to stop. She shifted again. The White Wolf took the lead, and Theron and his forces followed their queen into battle. The ritual chamber was a nightmare. Circular room carved from black stone, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. At the center, a pentagram drawn in blood, and chained within it a dozen Omegas, all young, all terrified. Moira stood at the head of the pentagram, chanting. Her hands glowed with dark magic, pulling at the Omegas' life forces, draining them. Vivian stood guard, holding a sword that crackled with the same dark energy. They'd known Theron was coming. They'd prepared. Stop this, Theron roared. Release them. I don't think so, Vivian said. She raised the sword. You want your precious Omegas? Come take them. Theron's forces poured into the room. The battle that followed was chaos. Mercenaries versus royal guards. Dark magic versus tooth and claw. The Omegas screamed, trapped in the pentagram, their life forces draining away to feed Moira's ritual. Lysandra went straight for Vivian. The two females clashed with a sound like thunder. Claws against enchanted steel. Ancient power against stolen magic. They were matched in speed and strength, dancing around the ritual chamber in a deadly ballet. You can't win, Vivian snarled. Even with your power awakened, you're still just one wolf. I'm not alone, Lysandra replied. Theron appeared at her side, massive in his black wolf form, silver eyes blazing. Together they drove Vivian back, forcing her away from the pentagram, away from the helpless Omegas. But Moira's chanting was reaching a crescendo. The dark magic pulsed, grew stronger, pulled harder on the trapped Omegas. One of them, a girl who couldn't have been more than 16, went limp. No. Lysandra shifted back to human, raised her hands. Silver light poured from her palms, crashing into the pentagram. The symbols flickered. The magic wavered. Moira's eyes snapped open. You dare interfere. I dare stop you from murdering innocents. Lysandra pushed harder, pouring more power into breaking the ritual. This ends now. The pentagram cracked. The Omegas gasped as the draining stopped, as they could breathe again. Moira screamed in fury, and Vivian, desperate and cornered, made a terrible choice. She plunged the enchanted sword into her own chest. Dark magic exploded from the wound, consumed her, changed her. When the light faded, Vivian Ashcroft was no longer beautiful. She was a monster, twisted, elongated. Her limbs too long, her joints bending wrong, her mouth full of too many teeth. The dark magic had transformed her into something that defied nature, something that shouldn't exist. If I can't have him, the thing that had been, Vivian rasped, then neither can you. She lunged for Theron. So fast, too fast, claws raked across his side, tearing deep. He roared in pain, stumbled. The monster raised her clawed hand for a killing blow, and Aldrich Ravencrest threw himself between them. The claws that should have pierced Theron's heart instead tore through Aldrich's chest. Blood sprayed. The old alpha fell. No. Lysandra's scream was anguished. She shifted again, the white wolf appearing in an explosion of silver light, and crashed into the Vivian monster with the force of a battering ram. They rolled across the floor, tearing at each other, destroying everything in their path. The monster was strong, incredibly strong. Fed by dark magic and stolen power, she matched Lysandra blow for blow. But Lysandra had something the monster didn't. She had a mate. Theron, injured but alive, joined the fight. His black wolf and Lysandra's white wolf moved as one, coordinated perfectly through the mate bond, attacking in tandem. Bite, tear, rake. The monster's black blood splattered across the chamber. But still it fought. Still it refused to die. Lysandra, Moira's voice cut through the chaos. You need to combine your power with his. The mate bond allows it. Together, you can destroy her. Why was Moira helping? Lysandra didn't have time to question it. She shifted back to human, as did Theron. They stood facing the monster, holding hands, the mate bond blazing between them like a visible cord of light. Together, Theron said. Together. Lysandra agreed. They raised their free hands. Silver light and golden light merged, twisted together, amplified by the mate bond, into something greater than the sum of its parts. Pure scouring power that burned away shadow and corruption. They released it. The combined blast hit the Vivian monster dead center. She had time for one last scream. Then she disintegrated. burned away to nothing. Not even ash remained. Silence fell. The battle was over. Theron's forces had subdued the remaining mercenaries. The Omegas in the pentagram were free alive, sobbing with relief, and on the floor Aldrich Ravencrest lay dying. Lysandra fell to her knees beside him. "Father," she whispered, "I'm sorry." Blood bubbled on his lips. "I'm so sorry, Lysandra. You were never weak, never broken. I was just too blind to see how strong you really were. Don't talk, save your strength. We can heal you." "No." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "This is my penance. This is how I earn forgiveness. Not from you. You owe me nothing. But from myself." Tears streamed down Lysandra's face. "You can't die. I just got you back. You never lost me, daughter. You were always in my heart. I just didn't know how to show it." His eyes were glazing. "Be the queen I couldn't let you be. Change the world. Make it better." His hand went slack. The light faded from his eyes. Aldrich Ravencrest Alpha of the Silverwood Pack died on the floor of a dark ritual chamber, having finally done one good thing in his life. He'd saved his daughter's mate. Lysandra wept. Theron pulled her into his arms, held her as she shook as the grief and anger and complicated love poured out. She'd wanted to hate him, wanted to never forgive him, but he'd died saving Theron, died protecting her happiness, and that would have to be enough. A sound made them both turn. Moira stood by the wall, her hands empty, tears streaming down her ancient face. "I suppose you'll kill me now," she said quietly. "Why did you help?" Lysandra demanded. "Why tell us how to stop Vivian?" "Because watching you two fight for each other, I remembered what I'd lost." Moira's voice broke. "My daughter loved her mate, truly loved him, even though he was brutal. She thought she could change him. She died believing he'd loved her back." She wiped her eyes. "I've spent 50 years hating the system that killed her. But you two, you showed me what the mate bond is supposed to be. Partnership, equality, love that makes you stronger, not weaker." Moira moved toward them slowly, hands raised. "I'm a traitor. I helped Vivian traffic Omegas. I orchestrated the assassination attempt. I deserve death." She knelt before Theron. "But before you pass sentence, know that I regret everything. Not because I was caught, but because I became exactly what I hated. I became the monster that killed my daughter." Theron looked at Lysandra. The choice was hers. Lysandra thought about mercy, about justice, about the cycle of pain and revenge. "You'll stand trial," she said finally, "before the full council. Every Omega you help traffic will have the chance to face you, and if they vote for death, then death it will be. But the decision won't be ours alone. It will be theirs." Moira bowed her head. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you, Your Majesty." Guards came forward, took her away, and Lysandra collapsed into Theron's arms, exhausted and grieving, and so tired. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "It's finally over." 3 weeks later, the entire kingdom assembled in the Grand Plaza before the palace. Thousands of wolves. Alphas, betas, omegas all gathered to witness something unprecedented. The public coronation of a Luna Queen who'd risen from disgrace. Lysandra stood in the royal chambers, staring at herself in the mirror. The dress was white, symbolizing purity, with violet accents that matched her new eye color. The lunar sovereign power had changed her permanently. Her eyes, once storm gray, now held flecks of silver and purple that caught the light. A crown sat on the table beside her, silver and white gold, set with moonstones that glowed with an inner light. She'd gone from kneeling in chains to wearing a crown in less than 2 months. It felt surreal. "You look terrified," Theron said from the doorway. He wore formal blacks, the crown of the Alpha King on his dark hair, handsome and powerful and absolutely hers. "I am terrified," Lysandra admitted. "What if they don't accept me? What if they still see me as the disgraced Omega who refused her mating?" Theron crossed the room, took her hands. "Then we'll make them see the truth, that you're the strongest wolf in this kingdom, that you saved dozens of Omegas from trafficking, that you stood against corruption and won." He pressed his forehead against hers. "You were never broken, Lysandra. You were always meant for this." "Together," she whispered. "Always together." They walked to the balcony hand in hand. The crowd below roared when they appeared. A sound like an ocean, thousands of voices raised in greeting. Elder Marcus, the interim council head, after Moira's trial and execution, stood ready with the ceremonial items. The crown, the scepter, the formal declarations. "Citizens of the northern kingdoms," Marcus announced, his voice magically amplified to reach every ear. "We are gathered here to witness the coronation of Lysandra Shadowbane, true mate to King Theron, bearer of the lunar sovereign blood line, protector of Omegas and rightful Luna Queen. He turned to Lysandra. Kneel and receive your crown. The word hung in the air. Kneel. She'd done so much kneeling. In chains, in pain, in submission. But this was different. This was ceremony. This was honor. Lysandra knelt on a velvet cushion, her head bowed, her heart racing. Marcus placed the crown on her head. Rise, Luna Queen. Rise and face your people. Lysandra stood. And Theron, the Alpha King, who'd ruled for over 3 centuries, who bowed to no one, who commanded absolute power and authority, took her hand and addressed the kingdom. For 320 years I have ruled alone, he said. I have made laws and passed judgments and shaped this kingdom with no counsel but my own. But that changes today. He turned to Lysandra, and in his eyes she saw love and pride and absolute devotion. This Omega, this queen, this magnificent wolf standing beside me, she looked at my laws and called them broken. She demanded change. She fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She risked everything to save strangers, and in doing so she showed me what true strength looks like. He raised their joined hands high. She is my mate, my equal, my partner in all things, and from this day forward, she rules beside me. Her word carries the same weight as mine. Her judgments hold the same power. What she commands you will obey. Theron's voice rang with absolute authority. I give you Lysandra, Shadowbane, Luna Queen of the Northern Kingdoms. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Theron wasn't finished. He released Lysandra's hand, and in front of thousands of witnesses, in front of the entire kingdom, he knelt before her. The Alpha King on his knees before his Omega Queen. The Omega who knelt in chains now stands crowned, he said. And the king who sat on a throne now kneels in devotion. We rule together, we rise together, and we will build a kingdom where no Omega ever has to choose between dignity and survival again. Lysandra looked down at him, this ancient, powerful male who'd given her everything, and felt her heart overflow. She reached down, took his hands, pulled him to his feet. Rise, my king, she said softly. We kneel to no one but each other. They kissed there on the balcony in front of the entire kingdom, and below the crowd went wild. Alphas who'd once sneered at Omegas reconsidered their beliefs. Betas who'd trafficked in slaves felt justice breathing down their necks. And Omegas, thousands of Omegas, saw one of their own wearing a crown and thought for the first time in their lives, maybe things really could change. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the royal suite, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Lysandra woke to the sound of soft cooing from the bassinets beside the bed. 1 year had passed since her coronation. 1 year of transformation and growth and building something new. The trials had been swift. Moira, facing testimony from over 100 Omegas she'd helped traffic, had been sentenced to death. She'd accepted it with grace, her last words an apology to every Omega she'd failed. Cassian Thornwell had been stripped of everything. Title land status, exiled beyond the kingdom's borders with nothing but the clothes on his back and a warning that returning meant immediate execution. He'd left screaming threats. No one cared. The Omega Sanctuary Network now stretched across every major pack. Safe houses, councils. Laws that actually protected the vulnerable instead of enabling their abusers. It wasn't perfect. Change never happened overnight. But it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. And 6 months ago, Lysandra had given birth to twins. A boy with his father's dark hair and silver eyes. A girl with white blonde curls and violet eyes that glowed when she laughed. Theron appeared in the doorway, already dressed, holding their daughter against his shoulder. She was making happy gurgling sounds, her tiny fists tangled in his shirt. Someone's awake, he said softly. Lysandra sat up, reaching for their son, who was starting to fuss in his bassinet. The moment she lifted him, he settled, nuzzling against her. They're growing so fast, she murmured. They have your strength, Theron said, settling beside her on the bed with their daughter. Both of them, I can already see it. And your stubbornness. That too. They sat like that for a long moment, just being. 2 parents holding their children. 2 mates who'd found each other against all odds. A knock on the door interrupted the peaceful moment. Marcus entered, carrying a stack of documents. Forgive the intrusion, your majesties. But the Eastern delegation has arrived. They're requesting an audience to discuss implementing Omega protection laws in their territories. Lysandra and Theron exchanged a look. The change was spreading. Beyond the northern kingdoms. Into territories that had held on to the old ways for centuries, because they'd proven it could work. That protecting Omegas didn't weaken a kingdom, it strengthened it. Tell them we'll meet them in an hour, Theron said. When Marcus left, Theron turned to Lysandra with that playful smile she'd come to adore. You know what this means. What? More work, more reform, more wolves who need convincing. More opportunities to change the world, Lysandra corrected. Together. Always together. Theron set their daughter gently in her bassinet, then took their son from Lysandra or chamber and did the same. Then with exaggerated formality he knelt before her. Your wish is my command, my queen. Lysandra laughed. You're ridiculous. Make me get up. She tugged him to his feet, pulled him close, kissed him deeply. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, we kneel to no one but each other. No one but each other, he agreed. And as the morning sun painted their chambers in gold as their children slept peacefully, as a kingdom flourished outside their windows, the king and queen stood together. Equal, partners, mates. The Omega who'd knelt in chains had become the queen who wore a crown. The king who'd ruled alone for centuries had found his equal. And together they were changing the world. One Omega at a time, one law at a time, one generation at a time. This was their legacy. This was their love. This was everything.